Okay, hello students. This is your video lecture on Fahrenheit 451, and this is for the second reading assignment. We've already read from pages 1 to 21, so this lecture will start at the bottom of page 21, and I'll just talk about a few things that I found interesting and that maybe I thought would help you understand the second section of our reading assignment. Of course, I want you to listen to this video and then go ahead and read the next section, which of course I will post another video lecture for that section next time. So first of all, looking at the bottom of page 21, the first thing we encounter here in the next section is the mechanical hound. And I hope that you understood that that is like a robot dog. And the interesting thing about that for me is that, they do sell robot dogs in stores like toys for kids. Do you know that? They're like made in Japan or different things like that. So one of your classmates commented in the discussion board how there's a very close relationship between what's going on in the world today, people watching a lot of TV, listening to earbuds, mechanical dogs. Okay, so there are a lot of things that are surprisingly accurate about this novel because it was written so long ago. What was it, 1950s? So quite a while ago. Okay, so we have the robot dog on page 21, and it continues on the next page. He goes out wandering at night and thinking about things because I think the girl Clarice is making him really question his life now. And I think many of you mentioned how much he's starting to change. From the beginning, he's saying, no, just happy. But now he's starting to think a little bit more about his life. And then they tell a story about the game they play with the robot dog. They let a mouse loose or something, and they let the dog go and kill the animal. So it's kind of a sick game. But of course, this is a very bad vision of the future. Remember, it's dystopian. It talks about a bad future. So we can see that the people aren't very good either. They're okay with kind of torturing the animals. All right. We meet a new person at the bottom of page 23. He's talking about a guy wearing a captain's hat and the sign of the phoenix. A phoenix is an imaginary bird that burns itself and then comes back to life. So it's interesting that they choose the phoenix as the symbol of the firemen. I know they burn things, but actually the phoenix comes back to life. So it'll be interesting to see if there's anything good that happens as we go through the novel. All right, so the captain, his name is Captain Beatty. We find out his last name in the pages that come. But you should have annotated his name there at the bottom of page 23. Next thing is he's talking about the robot dog. And the robot dog has suddenly started to be growling at Montague when he comes in. We're not sure why. But he feels a little guilty about something, and it might have something to do with that ventilation grid that he's hidden something behind. Maybe he feels guilty about something there. Many of you mentioned that maybe he's hidden some books there. So it's going to be interesting to find out what he really hid there. I don't know for sure if they're books or not. I don't remember from reading this when I was very young. We'll find out together because I'm reading this along with you. Okay, so he feels like he has a little suspicion here. If you look at the bottom of page 24, I annotated that. I don't know how well you can see this on the video. I'm trying to show you my book. But at any rate, you know where I'm talking about. He says, Montague did not move. He stood thinking of the ventilator grill in his hall and what was hidden behind the grill. But we can think it maybe is some kind of books that are illegal. Okay, on page 25 in the middle, we learn the captain's last name is Beatty. So anytime you see captain, he means Captain Beatty of the fire department. He's the captain in the fire department. Here, at the bottom, we see a little bit more about Clarice on page 25, and we can see that they are friends. Now, I don't know how this relationship is going to change because I don't remember from reading this a long time ago, but many of you talked about how he might be in love with Clarice, but I think he's not in love, as I mentioned to some of you in the conferences. I think that he really cares for her as a daughter more so than any kind of sexual way. So I don't want you to, I really don't feel like at this point that there's any kind of romance between the two, but they do care about each other and they are friends. And you can see that is inferred by this section at the bottom of page 25, where he talks about the times that Clarice was getting walnuts, and she likes nature a lot. And that's an interesting point too. Okay? Of course, at the top of page 26, I referenced this in some of your responses. That's where he's talking about he likes her, feels like a father to her. That's at the top of page 26. Again, I'm not sure if you can see that on the video. Be interesting if that comes out. Okay. We see at the bottom of page 26 that he's kind of starting to wake up to the world around him. He's starting to appreciate things in a different way. He's having a metamorphosis. He's changing because of the effects of books and Clarice. We see on page 27 that Clarice does not fit in with the other students at school. And we see school is a very strange place here in this future. If you look at the top of page 27, look at the school activities. Oh, it looks like they just run around and play basketball. They never ask questions. And they just give you a bunch of answers for 4 hours. They're just a film teacher. So instead of having a real teacher, I guess they're doing kind of what you're doing now, which is watching a movie of somebody teaching. So it's funny how many things are true today that he imagined a long time ago. So this is very interesting. We hope that the bad things don't happen. But you see at the bottom of page 27, she doesn't have any friends. And she also mentioned, do you notice how much people hurt each other? So we're talking about a society now in the future, this imaginary future, where people really aren't very nice to each other and they're kind of cold to each other. And amazing, at the bottom of page 27, I was just so surprised to find out that even the children are killing each other, and in this society, they just accept that. So we see that something very bad here is happening in this imagined world. Okay, there's a lot of technology on page 28, but there's not a lot of conversation. People don't connect to each other in the way they did before, but they spend a lot of time looking at television and that sort of thing. All right, so some very strange things are happening on page 29 with the mechanical dog. We see that they can program. The mechanical dog is programmable like a robot. You can make it do things, good things or bad things, presumably. And here somebody programmed the mechanical dog to kill him. So we see that there's a lot of suicide, people killing themselves in this imagined future. Obviously, that tells us, it implies, we infer, that something is very wrong with this world in the future, where people kill themselves and each other. Very violent world. Also on page 29, another important thing happens. Clarice disappears. He doesn't see her for a period of time. So that makes me wonder, and I also feel a little worried about her. I don't know how you feel about that, but suddenly she disappears. I hope she comes back. Again, talking about inference and metaphor, at the top of page 30, we see how they describe the environment in the firehouse. They have talking clocks that tell the time, 1:02, 1:03, 1:04, and it tells that. But at the top it says it was a cold hour, and a cold morning, and a cold year. Again, this talks to us about how the society is distant. And remember our vocabulary word in the reading text, which was a tone word, it says warmth. So cold is the opposite of warmth. So somebody who has warmth is caring and loving, and then somebody who is cold is distant and they don't care. So maybe they're kind of hinting at us about all these cold, cold, cold. They're trying to show us that this world is not very friendly and not a very nice place to live. Okay. Also, he sees that the men are all just like him, and he's concerned about that. He said, we're all kind of, we look the same, we have the same kind of hair. Okay. Another thing that happens on page 31 is he starts to feel empathy for the people that have their houses and their books burned. He starts to feel something for them. And then we see when he refers to the old days, didn't firemen used to put fires out? Everybody says, no, they didn't put fires out. We always started fires. And then we see here a false history. So this is like what we would call propaganda. It's the government lying to the people. Do governments ever lie to people today? I think they probably do. Okay, so in this imagined world, Ray Bradbury, the author of this book, imagines that they lie to each other. And they say that Benjamin Franklin was also burning things when actually Benjamin Franklin started the first fire departments that put out fires. So we see that they even have been fooled by their own education system, teaching them the wrong things. Okay. And he's distracted by this. He even forgets his helmet when he goes off because he's thinking of all these things suddenly are new to him. He's starting to see this world for the really bad world that it is. Everybody around him seems perfectly fine. They don't know. But he's starting to wake up and he's starting to learn about the world. Okay, so here we see when they go to burn Mrs. Blake's book. Mrs. Blake is a new character at the bottom of 33. She owns some books and her house is being burned down. Normally, Montague tells us they take away the people who own the houses before they get there, so they don't see how upset the people are about losing all of their books. But in this case, something different happens. They're called over and the lady is still there. And of course, we see that he starts to realize that the people care very much about the books that they lose. And it's a very powerful story here about Mrs. Blake, because I think most of you got the idea that at the end, when they were going to burn all her books, and they were trying to get her to leave the books and get out of the house so they could burn it. But before they could get her out, she lights the match, throws it on there, and presumably she burns her books, her house, and herself. So we can see from this, we infer, right? They imply and we infer that she loved her books so much that she was willing to die rather than have them burned in front of her. So again, that sort of ends on a sad note, this particular section of the novel, and we're going to see where it goes. How does this affect Montague? What happened to Clarice? Why has she disappeared? What's behind the ventilation vent? So there are certain questions that you may have about the novel that you're supposed to have. Like I said in some of the conferences, this is a kind of a mystery story. So we have questions about Clarice and her uncle. We have questions about the ventilation vent. We have questions about what happens to Montague as he goes forward, knowing that he's hurting these people so badly. Those questions, I hope, will be answered as we continue to read. So I hope that keeps you interested in the novel, and this video lecture has kind of helped you start the next section. So please go ahead then and continue. Our last section ended, it ended with Mrs. Blake, the lady, burning herself alive with her books. So that's a very bad way to end, but now we're going to continue from page 37, and please follow the directions on Blackboard and read our next section between now and our next class on Thursday. All right, well, I hope that helped you understand a little bit about our next section of Fahrenheit 451. Good luck with your work on all of our chapters. Make sure you're ready for vocabulary. And of course, again, thank you for our individual conferences. It was a pleasure for me to talk to each one of you, and I certainly wish you all the best going forward, no matter what happens. Okay, so thanks again. Always ask if you have any questions when we have our class on Thursdays. That's an important part, because in these video lectures, I don't know exactly what your questions will be, so I have to kind of imagine what you would have a question about. And please help me help you by bringing your questions to class for vocabulary, reading, or the novel work. Thank you, and have a good week.